Has you ever felt like certain political terms mean one thing, but then they seem to be used to achieve something else entirely?
Oh, definitely. It happens a lot, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty common experience, isn't it? It often leaves you wondering, what's really going on beneath the surface? Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we try to peel back those layers on complex ideas and get to the heart of what's truly shaping our world.
Glad to be diving in.
Today, we're embarking on a particularly fascinating and, frankly, quite provocative deep dive. We're looking into the phenomenon of right-wing populism.
A big topic.
A huge topic. But we're not just taking a bird's eye view. We're going to examine it through a very specific and critical lens. An anarchist-communist critique.
Okay.
This perspective is laid out with, striking clarity by the blogger Spirit Whisper in their piece, The Wolf in Populist Clothing.
Right, I've read that one. It's quite pointed.
It is. So our mission for you, our listener, is to truly understand this particular framework for analyzing right-wing populism. We want to dissect its arguments, unpack how Spirit Whisper sees these movements operating.
And just to be clear up front.
Exactly. As always, we'll explore the arguments presented in this source material impartially. We're aiming simply to understand the analysis offered without endorsing any particular political viewpoint ourselves.
Precisely. My role today is really to help connect these critical dots that Spirit Whisper lays out, maybe provide some broader context for understanding this specific critique, and highlight the connections between the arguments being made.
That sounds great.
And, crucially, when we talk about an anarchist-communist critique, it's important to remember where that's coming from. We're approaching these movements from a perspective that fundamentally questions state power and capitalist hierarchies. Spirit Whisper's analysis is rooted in this idea of seeking a society organized around mutual aid, collective liberation, and dismantling systems of exploitation. So it's a very distinct ideological lens to view populism through.
Okay, let's unpack this right away then. Let's dive into how right-wing populism presents itself, according to Spirit Whisper's analysis.
Right.
If I'm getting the core argument here, they're saying that despite all the common people rhetoric, these agendas are actually, the source says anything but populist. Is that the fundamental split we need to grasp?
That's exactly it. Spirit Whisper argues that figures we've seen globally, people like Donald Trump or Jair Bolsonaro, they've undeniably gained a lot of traction. And they do it by positioning themselves as these, fervent champions of the common people. They often use rhetoric that the source describes as loud, divisive, and misleading, which maybe ironically resonates really deeply with people who feel disillusioned by mainstream politics, feel left behind.
And what's interesting is Spirit Whisper's claim that this isn't just accidental. It's not a misstep.
No, not according to this critique.
The source claims this rhetoric ultimately serves only to entrench power structures that oppress the very people they claim to defend. It's presented as more than just a political tactic.
Right.
Spirit Whisper labels it a deliberate and dangerous ploy to distract, divide, and maintain control. That implies a pretty calculated deception at its heart.
What's truly fascinating here, and quite vivid in the writing, is how the source uses that powerful metaphor of a Trojan horse.
Yes.
Spirit Whisper contends that right-wing populism, viewed this way, essentially invites people to support their own oppression in the guise of national pride or cultural preservation. It's a strong critique suggesting these movements aren't what they seem on the surface.
And this isn't entirely new in politics, is it? That idea of something appearing as one thing but being another.
Well, no. Similar dynamics, maybe called entryism by some scholars, have been seen before, though often with very different goals. But Spirit Whisper uses this metaphor specifically to highlight a fundamental divergence they see. They argue that a genuine populist movement, from their perspective, would seek to dismantle the structures that perpetuate inequality, rather than just reinforcing them under a new banner.
So it's the difference between challenging power and just consolidating it differently.
That's how the critique frames it, yeah. Consolidating it under a more, perhaps, palatable banner for some.
Okay, so after laying that foundation, what other tools does Spirit Whisper say are in this populist toolkit? The critique really zeroes in on specific tactics next, doesn't it?
It does.
Let's turn to what Spirit Whisper identifies as a primary tool, scapegoating. The argument seems to be that right-wing populism relies heavily on this to divert attention.
Yeah, divert attention from what the source calls systemic issues created by neoliberal capitalism.
And maybe we should quickly clarify what Spirit Whisper means by neoliberal capitalism here.
Good point. So when Spirit Whisper uses that term, they're generally pointing to an economic ideology that emphasizes free markets, deregulation, privatization, less government spending. And from the specific anarchist-communist viewpoint, that ideology is often seen as something that perpetuates systemic inequalities and concentrates wealth. So when they talk about scapegoating...
It's about deflecting blame from those bigger economic structures.
Exactly, deflecting blame.
So instead of focusing on those structural problems, Spirit Whisper claims right-wing populists identify these convenient targets, like immigrants, marginalized communities, maybe abstract elites.
Mm-hmm. Convenient targets.
The source explains that this blame shifting isn't just dishonest, it's portrayed as profoundly harmful. It redirects public anger away from what the critique sees as the real culprits, meaning, according to the source, the wealthy and powerful who benefit from the status quo.
Okay.
And by constructing this us versus them narrative, the source argues, these populists foster distrust, hostility. They fracture social solidarity, and that effectively prevents unified resistance.
It's a powerful claim about how that division serves a bigger purpose. It stops people working together.
Right. So, moving beyond scapegoating, Spirit Whisper also dives deep into the manipulation of language.
Ah, yes. This is key.
The critique claims that terms we hold dear, words like freedom, patriotism, sovereignty, are often co-opted and their meanings twisted.
Twisted to fit a specific narrative, yeah. One that, the source argues, serves elite interests rather than the broader traditional understanding of those words.
And why these tactics? What's the bigger picture here, according to the source?
Well, this raises an important question, right? Spirit Whisper argues they all connect back to that broader aim, preventing collective action and maintaining existing power structures.
Okay.
They actually describe this phenomenon as faux rebellion. Like a fake rebellion.
A faux rebellion. How does that work?
So right-wing populists present themselves as anti-establishment. You hear them railing against the swamp, fake news, or globalist elites, all that stuff.
Very familiar rhetoric.
But the critique claims they're often deeply embedded within the systems of power they claim to oppose. So it's presented as a convenient facade.
A facade that allows them to push agendas that seem radical, but aren't really changing the core system.
That's Spirit Whisper's argument, yes. They're presented as radical solutions when, in this view, they're anything but. Now, it's worth noting, some observers might say leaders can genuinely believe they are serving the common people as they define them.
Sure, intention versus outcome.
Right. Even if the outcomes, from Spirit Whisper's viewpoint, harm many. But for Spirit Whisper, the effect of this faux rebellion is still the same. It prevents real systemic change.
And that example of freedom you mentioned earlier really stuck with me. Spirit Whisper argues that in this kind of populist talk, freedom often translates not to broad liberation, but to very specific things.
Yeah, like deregulation, tax cuts for the wealthy, and the erosion of social safety nets.
That's not just playing with words, is it? That has real consequences.
It's far from just semantics. And going back to that idea of freedom, the anarchist-communist perspective offered by Spirit Whisper presents a really sharp contrast.
So.
For them, true freedom means liberation from systems of exploitation and oppression. It's described as a collective freedom of all people to live without fear of poverty, discrimination, or state violence.
That's a very different vision.
It's a world away from the selective freedom Spirit Whisper suggests right-wing populism offers. It frames freedom as this universal collective thing, not just an individual license that might end up harming others.
Okay, so we've looked at the presentation, the tactics. Now, what does Spirit Whisper say this all means for society, for individuals? Let's explore those deeper impacts the critique highlights.
Right, the consequences.
First, there's the impact on social solidarity. That us versus them framework we talked about.
Yeah.
The source says it systematically replaces empathy with suspicion, solidarity with individualism.
And this isn't just abstract, is it? Spirit Whisper shows how the narratives shift quite dramatically under this influence.
Like how?
Well, poverty, for instance. It gets framed not as a systemic issue, maybe related to the economy or lack of opportunity, but as a personal failing. Immigration gets recast as primarily a threat, rather than, a complex social or economic thing.
And social welfare.
That becomes a drain on hardworking taxpayers instead of being seen as a collective safety net.
And Spirit Whisper argues this deliberately divides the working class.
Yes, pitting groups against each other, hindering any collective response to those broader systemic issues, turn people against each other, basically.
Then there's the idea of exclusionary identity politics. Spirit Whisper draws a really clear line here.
Yeah, they make a distinction.
While the left's version of identity politics, generally speaking, tries to address historical injustices, promote equality for marginalized groups, the right's version, according to this critique, is different. It's exclusionary and hierarchical.
How so?
It promotes a narrow, often xenophobic definition of national identity, one that kind of alienates anyone who doesn't fit a very specific mold.
Okay.
And the source claims this isn't about genuine empowerment for the in-group either. It's about control. Yeah, a way to divide the population into those who are deemed worthy of rights and those who are not. Segmenting power, limiting it.
I see. Creating tiers within society.
Exactly. And finally, let's look at the economic agenda. Spirit Whisper sees this as maybe the clearest sign of betrayal, if you like, of the working class. Despite paying lip service to the struggles of ordinary people, the source asserts their policies consistently favor the wealthy and powerful. Can you give us some examples, some hallmarks of what Spirit Whisper points to here?
Yeah.
Policies we might recognize.
Absolutely. The hallmark Spirit Whisper sites are pretty clear, and you see them debated all the time. Things like tax cuts for the rich,
Okay.
deregulation, often of environmental or financial rules,
Right.
and attacks on labor unions trying to weaken collective bargaining power.
We've definitely seen examples of those kind of policies discussed globally. Slashing corporate taxes, rolling back regulation.
Exactly. Often with the promise of trickle-down benefits that Spirit Whisper would argue often don't materialize for most people.
So Spirit Whisper concludes pretty pointedly on this, saying, looking at these outcomes, this is not a movement for economic justice. It's a movement to entrench inequality.
Yes. From this critique's viewpoint, the economic policies really betray the populist rhetoric. The actions don't match the words.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture then, what Spirit Whisper is laying out is how these social and economic strategies work together. They reinforce existing hierarchies, uphold capitalist exploitation.
Reinforce and uphold.
It's presented as this kind of self-sustaining cycle. The populist rhetoric creates division.
Which then allows for policies benefiting the powerful.
At the expense of the working class.
All while keeping up the illusion of supporting the common people.
It's a very systemic analysis, isn't it? Connecting all the dots.
It absolutely is. Spirit Whisper's critique builds systematically. It shows how each piece, the rhetoric, the scapegoating, the language games, the exclusionary identity stuff, the economic policies, they all sort of lock together to maintain a status quo that benefits a select few, despite the man of the people facade.
Okay, expanding on other impacts. Spirit Whisper also critiques environmental policies. Or maybe, more accurately, what the source sees as a disregard for them in these movements.
Yes, that comes up too.
The source talks about a disregard for the future, where climate action is often dismissed, called elitist or even anti-nationalist.
Right.
How does the anarchist-communist perspective connect the dots on this particular issue? Why is that significant for them?
Well, this is where the core ideas of the anarchist-communist critique really come through clearly.
Okay.
From this viewpoint, the climate crisis is not merely an environmental issue, but a social one. And crucially, it's seen as exacerbated by capitalism's insatiable drive for growth.
So it connects back to the economic system again.
Directly. Spirit Whisper argues that the constant demand for expansion, for resource extraction, for profit maximization stuff they see as inherent in unchecked capitalism leads directly to ecological devastation.
So when right-wing populism dismisses climate action,
Spirit Whisper sees it as aligning with that capitalist drive, not challenging the structures causing the harm, but actually reinforcing them.
a rejection of collective responsibility for the environment.
Exactly. In favor of short-term economic gains, often for specific industries, which for Spirit Whisper is just another way these movements betray the long-term well-being of everyone and align with corporate interests.
That's a stark warning.
Yeah, they warn that by ignoring or downplaying this crisis, these movements are essentially condemning future generations to a world of scarcity, conflict, and environmental collapse. It's pretty heavy.
So given this really stark analysis, this deep critique, what does Spirit Whisper propose as the solution? From this anarchist-communist viewpoint, what's the alternative? It sounds like a fundamental shift is needed.
Indeed. And the answer, according to the source, lies squarely in collective action and direct democracy.
Not in leaders, then.
No. Spirit Whisper's critique emphasizes that true liberation will come not from charismatic leaders, but from the people themselves. People organizing, working together to dismantle oppressive systems.
And build something different.
Yes, build a society based on equality, mutual aid, cooperation. This is really a foundational anarchist-communist principle. Change has to come from the bottom up.
Through empowered communities, not top-down orders.
Exactly, not through top-down directives or just relying on electoral politics. Essentially, Spirit Whisper argues that right-wing populism offers only the illusion of empowerment.
And real power.
Real power, in this view, comes from solidarity and collective struggle. It's a complete reimagining of where political power truly resides and how it should be used.
Wow. Okay, so to recap, we've taken a truly deep dive today into Spirit Whisper's anarchist-communist critique of right-wing populism.
Well, I've heard a lot of ground.
We really did. We examined how it presents itself as a champion of the people, while in this specific view, ultimately serving to entrench existing power structures.
The persona versus the reality.
We looked at its tactics division through scapegoating, the manipulation of language.
Those tools of distraction.
And we explored its significant social and economic impacts, eroding solidarity, pushing policies that consistently favor the wealthy, according to the source.
Yeah, the real-world consequences.
And finally, we touched on the proposed alternative from this viewpoint, collective action, direct democracy, emphasizing that real change needs solidarity and a totally different kind of politics.
Yes, I think the central idea from Spirit Whisper's work, the main takeaway, is that understanding the true nature behind the rhetoric, really looking beyond that wolf in populist clothing metaphor, is crucial.
Seeing past the surface.
Exactly. Real change, as this critique argues, demands that commitment to solidarity and a form of political engagement that fundamentally challenges the established hierarchies, rather than just, swapping one set of leaders for another.
Scrutinize the outcomes, not just the promises.
That's a good way to put it.
So this deep dive into Spirit Whisper's critique really invites us to consider, doesn't it? Yeah. How do we as individuals, as communities, discern between movements that truly champion the common good and those that might just be using populist language to serve other agendas?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. It's a question that resonates so deeply in our current political climate, and it demands ongoing critical thought from all of us.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really encourage you to continue exploring these complex ideas for yourself.